Hi and welcome to PolyOriginals with Fiona Abel-Smith. This is what we're going to do in today's session, a little stack of presents, and I thought we could have some fun, surprise lots of people by showing them what you can do with polymer clay, because most people will expect this to be wrapping paper that you've used as opposed to polymer clay veneers. So the surprise is that they're polymer and you can create these perfect polymer presents. It's a lovely workshop to do this one, so I'm going to show you a couple of ways to create the bottom underneath shapes, make sure they're nice and light, how to create the veneers, how to do the ribbons around the outside, and then how to do the decoration, but also this little holly cane and how to create the little holly leaves, and of course the little bit on the bottom as well. So lots of different ideas and techniques, and then it's a case of using them however you want and creating your own pieces. I originally designed them to be hanging decorations, and they are sort of light enough to be able to do that with. However, they also make very good table decorations, particularly if you just stop with a flat one on the bottom, and I'll show you one of those that I've made at the very end and the colour schemes we've used for that. All the information you need, all the equipment will be detailed down below. On the couple of occasions we do a cane or do something like the ribbons or the holly, I will detail the amounts of clay, but other than that it really depends on what you've got in your stash, how much polymer clay you've got, what colours you want to use, and of course the size of the parcels you make. So for that one, just figure out what you've got and work it out and use whatever you need to cover your own presents. Let's start off by showing you the couple of different options you've got for creating the underneath shapes of our parcels. If you're making hanging decorations, you need them to be light. So the first way you can do it is using Sculpey Ultra Light, and this literally is a very light clay. You can cut it straight out of the packet if you wish. And I would generally do this on a measuring sheet so I could get myself a nice even thickness. And there you have some present sizes, but as I say, do it on a measuring sheet. You can then either put the hole in before you bake by twisting a needle tool through the middle, or drill the hole afterwards with a small drill bit, and these have been baked, and bake according to the manufacturing instructions for the Sculpey Ultralight. If you don't have any of that, then you can simply use corrugated cardboard. So this is just a piece from a package box that arrived some time ago, and I've just cut myself even squares or oblongs and cut as many as you want to stack up for the height of the piece you want, and then just glue them together. So those are some that I would do as squares, and if you want a round, just cut a strip in the direction that the corrugated card goes and twist it round itself and add as many layers as you want, and then tape the whole thing with some masking tape. And for these ones you would then just put the holes through when the glue's finished, because the needle should stick through nice and easily. And then with a thin layer of scrap clay, simply wrap the whole piece in scrap clay. This hasn't been baked yet, but you can see there I've wrapped it in just a thin layer of the scrap clay. I've put my hole down through the centre because that's how it's going to stack up with the other presents, and I've also put a little hole on all the corners because it's corrugated cardboard, just so that when it heats in the oven any air will escape out of the sides. And I'd do a selection of those, all different sizes, tent the whole tile in aluminium foil and bake according to the manufacturer's instructions for the brand of clay you are using. And there's a selection of the baked ones covered in the scrap clay, ready to decorate. And when I'm working today, I'm going to work and do all the presents on the 1mm wire. It's just some odd bits of jewellery wire I've got, so I'll cut off a length and I'll use that as a guide when I'm making my holes and when I'm baking. But when I'm putting it all together, I'm actually going to put it together on a 0.8mm. So that means that if I've got any movement or it gets smaller at any point when I'm working on it, the 0.8 should fit nicely through when we've finished, and it's easier to sort of twist around and put some beads on if we want to at the end as well. So those are the two bits of wire I'm using, and again the amount you need is going to be taller by a good sort of inch, 2.5 centimetres at either end from the stack of presents you have created. And of course, all of our stack of presents is going to be slightly different depending on what we're doing. So one last thing, just out of interest, we've got our 2 pieces here, one with the ultralight, one the cardboard with that thin layer of clay on, virtually the same size, and actually exactly the same weight. I thought they were, but just to be sure, I weighed them, and they are exactly the same weight. So whether it's ultralight or whether it's cardboard covered in clay, the weight is the same. And of course, I should just mention the other option you can do, which is done a lot in polymer clay, is aluminium foil. You could create all sorts of nice shapes just using aluminium foil, but for the square parcels and rectangular parcels we were doing today, I felt it was easier to do in cardboard rather than in foil. I'm using a mixture of cutters for all the designs we're doing today. Some are your straightforward rounds. I've got a couple of smaller oval ones in there as well. They're quite nice. And these ones are good because they come with a plunger to get it out. These ones you quite often need a needle or a cocktail stick to push through to get the clay out. I've also got a range of the pack pen cutters, and these are great because they come on a little plunger which pushes the clay out when you've sort of finished with it. And I've got a holly leaf, a Christmas tree, a snowflake, a little bell, don't know if you can see that, lovely little bell, a little gingerbread man, he looks great on wrapping paper, and then a selection of 5 Christmas ornament cutouts. And again, there are loads of other wonderful miniature cutters you can get, all which look really good for the sort of things we're doing today. So just get whatever you have to hand. And I will of course show you some designs which don't need anything other than a plain blade or a ripple blade or a craft knife. There's no point me giving you amounts of clay for this one. I will talk you through the thicknesses I make the clay and give you the rough details of the sizes we're doing, but because everyone's presents are going to be slightly different and everyone's how they put them together is going to be slightly different, as they just work in what you've got. And same with the colours and the amounts. I'm just using little leftover bits I've sort of pulled out of my clay boxes, and do the same with whatever you've got left over. If you're brand new to clay, then get yourself some lovely bright new packets of colours of clay and just use those. I'm going to show you and I'm going to create more designs than I actually need for the 5 presents I've got here, just to show you some different variations. And then once I've got all those done, I will choose the ones I want to do and create and wrap all the presents. When you're sort of doing it, have a think about how you want them to go. So I'm probably going to put probably do them at sort of right angles, have that one on top, and I quite like it where I've got something underneath, so as it hangs you've got sort of more of an interest down below, and then we'll add a little dangle on the bottom as well. So have a think about how you want your presents to stand, and then think about which design you want to go on, and then we'll also talk about the designs to put around and the ribbons to put around and how we do the decorations for them. So loads of different pieces to this one. Use as many or as few as you like, and be as complex or as simple as you like, but above all, have fun and enjoy what you're doing with this one. Right, let's start and get some clay and start creating some patterns. So we'll start with a nice bright red, and I've put this through on a thinnish setting of my pasta machine, so for me that's setting number 6, and all of the base layers I do will go through on that setting. That setting is thin enough that we can wrap nicely around our presents, but thick enough that we can put a decoration on here, roll it in, or even put it through the pasta machine and still have a nice thickness for what we're doing. When I'm doing it, I make sure that my piece is big enough to wrap around the present I've got the idea for, and so I do it the same way as you'd cut a piece of normal wrapping paper to wrap around something. And I also use this measuring sheet. The measuring sheet is freely downloadable from www.printablepaper.net. And if you notice, I've put it so it's up to one corner when I first cut it out, because that way if we need to measure anything, particularly along the diagonal, we've got a good starting point, because most wrapping papers have a repeat pattern. Even if it's random as it goes along, which this one's going to be, it's sort of relatively evenly spaced. The first one we're going to do is using little cutouts, and I'm going to use a little Christmas tree cutter on the pack pen. If, however, you don't have one of these, you can just simply, out of a little bit of emerald clay, which is the clay I'm using, some nice emerald green, cut yourself little triangles and you'll get exactly the same effect. But obviously it's quicker and easier if you've got a little cutter. So we're going to create a snowy effect background, and I've done this very simply by just rolling out thin strips of white. Now you'll see that they are uneven. I've done that on purpose because we want this to look like little snowy banks that the trees are sitting on. And all I've done to do that is take a little bit of white clay, roll it to quite a thin log, and then simply on my work surface use my fingers, simply spread as I go and as I roll, and you end up with a long thinnish sheet of your clay. So all we're going to do then is we are going to put them on, and I'll sort of do something like that. So I'm thinking about the size of my Christmas trees, and I'm just doing a little bit of undulation as we go, coming out roughly the same size, and just repeat. So whatever size, if you've cut your triangles are cut at. And I'm not bothered about each line being the same because, as I say, a lot of papers do have a variation, particularly when it's something natural, like little trees. And that's probably about it. Just a little bit on here, just going off the edge a little bit. And those are our white bits done. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a nice clean roller and just give those a little bit of a roll in, going that direction first, just pressing down gently so they don't move off where I've put them. And now I can go backwards and forwards over them to really push them back into the red background. So, having got our snowy banks, we need to get our trees, and I've put my emerald green clay through on the thinnest setting on my pasta machine, so that was setting number 9, and I've taken loads of little cutouts. So all I have to do now is pick them up and place them so they're half sitting on the white of the snowy bank, and just add them along each row. And it's as simple as that. I'll get all these done and bring you back when I've got them all in place on top of our red and white. Once all the trees are in place, I'm simply going to roll over them, as we did before, just to push them ever so slightly down into the background. So we get our rows of little green trees sat on our snowy banks. And very gently lever up the clay from the sheet, being careful not to get the blade anywhere near my hand. Take your time, do it gently. And it's much easier to get it off something like a laminated sheet, which will fold and move as you do it. But there is our first sheet of paper ready to wrap round one of our presents. So let's move on to another design. For the next one I've used purple, and I've got a couple of variations here, because one of them I'm going to be using my little cutters again. So I've got the holly leaf, the gingerbread men and the bells, but if you don't have any of those you can simply use round cutters instead, and I've got 3 different sizes of round cutters, and this one I'm going to do completely random. So it's a case of starting with whichever one you want to do and just adding them on in a completely random fashion. Gingerbread man, and some bells, and a holly leaf, and building it up like that, and I'll bring you back when I've finished across the thing. And the other one, quite often when you're cutting out on things like laminated sheet, they stay in place, so that's fine because you then just roll the clay back. And we've got something similar that we can do here with our rounds. So I'll bring you back when I've got all those finished and show you how they both looked with a finished piece. So there's the random patterns, and all I'm going to do as before with a nice clean roller, just gently push them slightly in, going one way to start with and then turning around and going the other. Because I've just used a very thin setting of clay, they don't really need to go through the pasta machine, but if you were going to do that, then obviously make sure your pasta machine is nice and clean before you put them through. Very slowly, try not to distort it too much, and then once you've got them down, give more of a firmer roll over until they completely disappear down into the background. And whether you go with the festive shapes or just the rounds, I think that gives it a really nice pattern. So that's pattern number 2 for you. Another fun thing to do is when you're taking your cutouts, and here again I've just used the little gingerbread man, but it could have been the round cutters, star cutters, whatever else you have to hand, make a piece or choose a piece that's the same size as a piece that's going to fit one of your presents. And I've done both of these on the thinnest setting on the pasta machine, so that's on 9 and that's on 9. And you should then be able to very gently peel this one off and just lay it on top of the other one. That way we'll get all our little gingerbread men, and if you give it a very gentle roll, not pressing down too hard at all, just so that those two pieces are sticking to each other, you will have much less distortion of your gingerbread men, or whatever other cutouts you've taken. And again, it's a nice little 3D pattern. You can use your paper, and you've still got all the cutouts you took to use for decorating something else. So that's suggestion number 3. The next one, I'm starting on the parcel that's the next size down, and as before I've done it on the measuring sheet right up to a corner, because this time we're going to do a diagonal line. And I've got an old Polymer Clay blade here which I've just put masking tape on the sharp end so that I can use the blunt end as a measuring tool. All I've done is use the measuring sheet just to give myself some rough lines diagonally across our piece. Of course you could use a ruler instead if you wanted to, if you haven't got a measuring sheet. Then, with again the clay on the thinnest setting, I've cut myself a whole load of oval shapes using a little cutter, and I've got a strip of red ready to cut thin stripes. These ovals I'm going to lay across the diagonal lines, and then we're going to add a red stripe in the middle. So here we have all the ovals added on, and I've missed out each line because I would have made too many, been too close together. And then I've got my very thin piece of red clay, and there's 2 ways you can take the very thin strips. You can use your blade, just position it carefully and pull away, or if you prefer, use something like a ruler. And you can see there that what I tend to do with the blade is go slightly rounded. So get yourself a nice straight edge, pull the ruler slightly back, and then with the corner of the blade just cut down through, and then you get yourself a thin strip. So whichever way you want to do it, get yourself a selection of thin strips. And we want these to be nice and straight. So what I tend to do is hold it down at one end, pull it across, and then just very gently stretch it. And I mean gently because obviously you don't want it to break, but when it's taut, with your finger just press down, and then you'll get a lovely straight line. So I'm going to do one line down the blues, one line going where my guideline was, in between the lines. And when you get your leftover pieces, there's probably enough to do another line elsewhere on the sheet, and just build up till you've got all of those done. Once we're all done, as always, take your roller and roll across, and I'm rolling in the direction that those lines are going, so if there's any distortion it's less likely to be going in the way that I'm doing the roller. One direction and the other, and when you've got it down, then you can roll to make sure those designs are pushed into the back. So there we go, another design. I think that's a great one. I use that one a lot when I'm making the presents. So again, working on the second parcel size down, there are other nice ways to add stripes. So I've got a lilac on my normal number 6 backing, and then I've got 3 different colours, a turquoise, a silver and a blue, all on the thinnest settings. And I was going to use the ruler to cut off strips and layer them up in diagonal lines across this. So widest for the blue, then the silver, and then the darker blue. So I did the thin blue stripes and I've pressed everything down just lightly with my finger, but it has distorted it ever so slightly, but that's fine because it's less likely than to distort when we do the normal rolling. Although of course you could just leave it so you've got your different levels, completely up to you. So there we go, rolled down quite firmly, so there is still a slight distortion where you can feel the different levels, but it's nicely done enough so we can certainly use that as a wrapping paper. So loads of different colour variations you can do for that one. So for a final stripe effect, I've got myself a sheet of silver on the normal setting 6 on my pasta machine, and then I've got a variety of colours all on the thinnest setting, and for this one I'm going to use the ripple blade. Now a lot of us have those, we don't use them an awful lot, but they are quite fun to do. And for this one, I'm just going to take thin cuttings or thin slices from the ripple blade. Now I've cut my sheets so that they're just narrower than ripple blade, and I've already cut off the top in line with the ripples. And what you want to do is you want to sit your blade sort of in line, but just down from where they are. Press down nice and firmly along the length, and they'll sort of flick away so that the clay comes away on the blade with you. You can then come over to here, lay it on the clay, and you've got a lovely ripple effect rather than a plain stripe. And I will do that in lots of random ways, going crisscrossing all over the place just to give a nice effect. And then as before, we'll press gently down with our finger just to press it slightly in, and then give a roll till it all fits into the background. And I'll bring you back when I've got that one done using all of these colours. And there's that one finished. So again, another way of doing stripes, random this time, but using the ripple blade. So lots of different variations, and once you get started on stripes, there's so many different things you can do and create some beautiful striped patterns to put around your parcels. When I'm covering the round ones, I want the piece to be at least as wide as they are and long enough to go around, but also enough that I can take a couple of round bits from the other part to go on the end. And this technique is the inlay technique, which has been done for a long time, so I'm not going to go into a huge amount of details because I know a lot of you will have done this before, but for anyone completely new, you simply take your cutter, you've got your initial background colour of clay, a couple of other colours of whatever you want, and a cutter, or you can have a variety. And what you do is you cut out from the background, cut out from one of your other colours, and simply pop that back into the background colour. And I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do different colours, and I will do them so that they overlap as well. Just pop that one back in. And keep working your way over, adding as many as you like. And the other thing is, of course, you can always add these back in to the other pieces that you've taken them out of, and then you'd end up with 3 different veneers with the same sort of cutouts. So it doesn't have to be this cutter, any cutter, whatever shape you like. And you'll see there are gaps where we've added the shapes in. So if you take something like a piece of sponge or a texture sheet, this is just packing foam or packing sponge, and then we'll just press down. And as you press down, it does 2 things. One, it gives a nice texture. And 2, it presses all the shapes into the background so it becomes one smooth sheet. And now we have a nice textured piece of clay to wrap around our presents. And of course you can do this with all sorts of different colours and different variations. Great one to do, and again, loads of fun. If when you've done the inset piece, you ever have problems with it splitting or you find it's too thin, then simply get another sheet, the same colour, and put it through the thinnest setting. I've done it as a backing, put the whole piece on, and then again you can go over with your texture and that'll stop it if that happens to you. So here is our nice selection, and I've got 8 clay sheets which I can use to wrap around our presents, and it's only got 5 presents, so I've got more than enough. But I'm also going to do a slightly different technique when I do the little top one, and I'll show you that when we get to that stage. When we're wrapping up our presents, it's nice to have some patterned ribbon to go around, and you can make it to coordinate or as a contrast for the presents that you're doing. And the ribbon is actually very simple to do. It's just layers of colour. If you don't want to do this, obviously you can just have single sheets of colour and just lay single little bands around and create the other ribbon bow details that I'm going to show you in a minute. I've cut some sheets here and they're all on the same thickness. They're setting number 3, so quite a medium setting thickness, because I want enough to do several presents. This is enough to do an awful lot of presents, so obviously don't do this amount if you're only doing a few. I've gone 2 inches or 5 centimetres by about 3.5 inches or about 8.5 centimetres. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to put the gold on the outside, then we're going to layer the white, and the red will effectively go in the middle. So I'm just layering those 3 together. Chop them in half. Fold the bottom onto the top, and there we have our ribbon pattern. Now obviously that's a bit thicker than I want at the moment. So as always, with a nice clean roller, I'm going to roll just on the top, and I'm going that way to make it slightly wider. And then you do need to roll over and do the same on the bottom, because otherwise only the top clay will move and the bottom clay won't. I'll move a little bit going that way. You can always pull it slightly as well, and then I'm going to roll it a little bit more that direction, and then I'm going to put it through in my thickest setting of my pasta machine. Now I also did this for the cute festive trees tutorial that I posted a couple of weeks back, and I've got again other colours there and loads of different variations and combinations we did, and I'll be using a lot of those for the presents we're doing today because I've still got a lot left over, but I thought rather than referring you back over there I would show you again. And this one I've gone, as I say, just slightly thicker because I'm going to use this on my biggest present, and then as the presents get smaller, so it doesn't matter if the ribbons get smaller, so I'm going to put this one through on setting 0, which is my biggest and thickest setting of the pasta machine. I'm just going to pinch slightly one end, and that's the end I'm going to put through the pasta machine just to save myself a little bit of distortion, although it will still be a wibbly wobbly end. So there we go, it's gone through, and now I can take a slice off, and that will be the pattern of the ribbon, and I'll just take thin slices of this and all the other combinations I've got for ribbons and use those to wrap the presents. Okay, we're at the fun part of where we're going to start wrapping our presents, and I'm going to have near to me the thicker piece of wire. So that's the piece of wire that's actually going to go through the hanging stack. but I'm going to have the thicker piece of wire because I'm going to use that to make sure I've still got access through all those holes whilst putting the presents together. I will also be using the needle to make sure I've got the holes poking through each sides. If you're not doing a hanging decoration, as I said, if you're just stacking your presents for making into something else, then you don't need to worry about this. You don't need to put any holes through, and you can have much more options as to where to put your presents and how to put them together. So the first thing I'm going to do is with my base, whether it's the ultralight or whether it's the clay covered cardboard bases, a little bit of liquid polymer clay just over this surface, not enough to make it slippy, just enough to make it tacky. And if you didn't have any of that, then again you could use PVA glue. You don't actually need to use anything, but it just helps the clay to position nicely onto your underneath form, and it helps you to move it around slightly if you want to do any movements when you are going. I have my next range of parcels ready to go there, and I have also put the little bit of liquid clay on all of those as well. So I'm going to turn my sheet over and place my parcel on the middle. And when I've got it where I want it to be, I'm just, with my needle, I'm just going to press down so I've got a slight mark when I pull that over. Very gently, just pull that up and persuade it to wrap over. Press it down. Do the same with the other side, again very gently, persuade it up over the side and to go over. And then if you chop down, and you're going to chop down so you're actually going through both layers if you've got enough to do that. And I'm just carrying on cutting through either end too. Then you pull off the top bit of that one, pull that one back, pull that piece off, and you should then get a nice fit. And with this particular pattern it almost looks nice as well when the whites line up, but don't expect them to, and they don't need to, because the bottom, the underneath of the parcel, is going to be partly hidden by the present that's going underneath it. So I'm just going to give a slight roll over that. I'll pick it up, see where the hole was that went through, and go back through, so that I now know I've got my hole in both positions. And because I know I've got a parcel going right on top and right underneath, when I hold it, if I hold it there, I'm not going to leave any fingerprints elsewhere. I'm just going to gently pat that down, make sure there's no air trapped. Now there are a couple of ways to create a nice parcel. I'm going to do the simplest one with this and the next layer up to show you, and I'm just going to pull the layers together gently, and I just want these two bits just to join in a little bit further than the parcel. So all I've done is I've got my finger underneath, so that when I'm rolling the two bits together, they're rolling against my finger so they can adhere to each other. Because what we can now do is very, very gently, I'm pressing down to those two bits join, and do the same right across the length. I don't want it to splay out too much, so I can push that in slightly. And I'm just doing it so that the two layers of clay are going to stick to each other. And repeat for the other end. So I'm looking for the fold to be roughly down the middle of either side, and then folding it over. So I'm going to use the measuring sheet here as a guide. I'm going to tilt it up ever so slightly, and then go 1.5 squares further out and chop down. And you should be able to chop down and have a nice seal on both parts. I'm going to do the same on the other side. Put it down, go down about 1.5, and there we have a nice seal. And that is our present finished, and that one wrapped as far as the outer wrapping goes, and then we can add some extra decoration. If you've got lots of fingerprints on, you can just gently run your finger across the surface of the clay and it should smooth them off. You can of course also texture either with a sponge or with a piece of material to get a nice texture on your finished piece. The other thing you can do is when you're finished, if you don't like the red clay showing through there, get something like a gold or a silver pen depending on what variation or colour scheme you're using, and you can just go over those very ends with either a pen or paint once the whole piece has finished baking. With our first present finished, the next thing I need to think about is where I'm going to position the next present up. This is where the wire comes in handy, because I can stick it through there and stick it through there, and I know that that's going to be centrally placed. And now I can think about where I want my decoration to go. So I know if I want to do a bow, then I would do it either over here or over here. So I think we'll do our bow over here. So I'm just going to put a little dot in there. And now I know where I want our ribbon to go and where I want any bow to go. So I'm planning on using that ribbon. So on the two ways I've shown you before, either with your blade cutting down a very thin strip, or with the ruler pressed up against this and using the edge of the blade to cut a strip, cut several strips to fit around the parcel. The size of the parcel is quite long, so what I'm planning on doing is I'll chop off the end first. This isn't going to go the whole way around, but that's not a problem. So starting where the ribbons or where the bow is going to go, I'm just very gently laying that on. Press it in as it goes round the end of the present. Press it in around there. And I'm going to just very gently pull it longer so it goes almost up to where it was going to meet on the underneath. And then I can do the same in the other direction so that I create a nice band the whole way around. Again, press it down in, round that bit and up until it meets on the bottom. And then do the same, go in the other direction. That will start there. Just wrap all the way around. And if we're lucky, be long enough to come up and meet at the top. Going to press slightly where it went over the ends, and there is our ribbon wrapped onto our piece. In the tutorial I published a couple of weeks ago, the cute festive trees, I showed you various ways to make little ribbons with 3 loops, 4 loops and 5 loops. So I'll put the details of where it is and the link to the video below here, so you can do that if you want to. But what we're going to do for this one is we are going to take ourselves a longish piece of clay, and then a piece 2 of those lines smaller, and then a small piece. And this, I've just got some plain red clay and I've put it to a thinnish setting, so setting number 4 on my pasta machine, which actually is very similar to the thickness I've cut for these lines. And I'm going to cut a piece that is hopefully more or less the same width, and this one will do in between those 2 for length. We are going to just roll gently across the middle piece, bring this end piece in and just fold it round. So just the ends are done as rounds. The red was the next size up. We're going to do the same, but these rounds are going to come in slightly closer. And hopefully they will sit just inside the gold ones. The next gold one comes along, same thing, just roll slightly in the middle and pull it round. Roll slightly, pull it round, so they're nearly touching, and that should, say, hopefully sit in the middle again. We'll pull those slightly out if you need to, and pull that one down. So we've got that, and you can either leave it like that, or if you've got room, just take a small piece, round something like your cable needle, chop it off so you've got a little round in there, and I'm just going to open this out slightly so that it fits in, and then we're going to put it all back together so that all the little rounds and the little curls all to come together, look like that on the side, and over the top they look like that. And then we can get our present and sit him diagonally over the top, pressing down on that middle red loop. So it just sits on the present like that to give ourselves a little bit of a bow with a contrasting flourish. So that is our first present done, and we know that the second present is going to sit on top like that, so we've still left lots of room for other decoration if we want to add it later. For the next one, I'm using that decorative sheet, and I'm going to do exactly the same as I did with the first one by way of putting the decoration and wrapping the sheet around it. Having got the second parcel wrapped, I've very gently placed it on top of the first one with the third one on top, so I can have a look, see where and how I want any decoration to go. And I think on this one I'm going to do a very simple line across there and across there, because I'm going to add some holly on that layer, I think, when we get to that stage. And I have here a ribbon cane which actually was the blue, the gold and the red, so that'll match perfectly, and I'm just going to take stripes, put over the top and over there, and because of the length all I'm going to do is from here round to there on both sides and then repeat on that side. So that's all I've done for that one so far, apart from just making sure that my hole is still in the right place. For my next piece down, I've got this larger, squarer block, so I'm going to use that design sheet. And this one we're going to do just slightly differently. So the same to start with. So I know I can chop a bit off here because I've got way too much. I still have enough to go over. So exactly the same as before, wrap around and over, and before we do, make sure we've got that hole coming through. Same as before, chop down through both layers and take away the excess, but you don't need to worry quite so much about the additional clay on this one. But this one we're going to wrap more as if it was almost like a traditional present with paper. So I'm just going to fold up just a little way in one side, and then going away from the corner up to where the middle of those two pieces are. I'm just cutting myself a triangle. You see that's laying flat. Then this piece is going to fold over, and again I'm going in on a triangle. You can pull the excess off, so that's going to fold like that, and then I'm going to cut down to that corner so that it pulls away. So we've got one triangle, two triangles. Same here, from the corner, go in, pull that away, and then from the corner going up, pull it away, and then all you have to do is pull the top down and again cut a triangle from either corner going towards the middle. And you then have what looks like a traditionally wrapped end of a parcel, and repeat for the other end. Okay, and there's your sweet little parcel all wrapped up in your colourful veneer. So again, we need to choose how that's going to sit and choose what sort of bows and things we put on that one. So that's going to sit on our present below like that, and we've got another present to go on top. So I think what I will do is I'm actually going to put a nice big sort of like bow rosette on either side of here. So I'll have the ribbon going across there and across there. So I need to choose a ribbon and do that first, and then I'll show you how I do the big rosettes. And I'm going to choose a ribbon that was green, red and purple, so again mirroring the colours of what we have. So I took the slices from there, just a couple, and wrapped them around the presents. We're ready to go. And now let's create some nice big sort of ribbony bows on either end of this present. So I'm going to do a nice big festive bow. The outside bit's going to be gold, and then the inside bit to match our present will be a purple. And then I'll probably add a little bit of sparkle right on the inside as well with a little crystal. So we're going to do a larger outer bow. So again, I'm just going to use my measuring sheet. So I am going to do just over, let's do 1.125 inches. So that's probably just under 3 centimetres. Give yourself a nice clean top edge. And then for the inner bit, we don't need as wide. So I'm going to do just under 1 inch, so about 2 centimetres. And again, a nice neat top edge. And I'm going to chop down just thin slices, 8 of the gold and 4 of the purple. So I've ended up doing double the amount because of course I'm going to do a bow on either end, and with my knife I've just lifted up the ends so that I can then pull off each slice. So starting with the larger, the gold, we're going to just lay it across and then put it across to create a cross of the clay. The next one will go on the diagonal. And then we're going to add more just round on the inside. So that one's going to go about there. That one there. And then the last one down there. And you can press slightly down on the middle so that they're all nicely joined in together. And then all we're going to do is we're going to very gently pull a bit up, and I'll let my craft knife help with that, either that or the cable needle, whichever I'm using. And then just press down, but not so it's gone right into the centre. Do the one that's opposite, because this is the outer ring and we're going to have the purple on the inside. And all I've done is just lay them down so that you've got the slight rounds. And then just slowly keep going round, always doing the two opposite each other until we've got the whole lot done. And I'll tend to do the opposite ones as I go around so that I've got them nicely spaced. And you end up with a lovely little, what looks like a ribbon sort of rosette or one of the ribbon bows. And then we're going to do the same with the purple, but only do 4 strips. So we only have the 8 loops coming, and this time, because they're slightly shorter, they're going right into the middle. So I'll fast forward through that for you. Okay, they don't have to be neat, they don't have to look exact, but hopefully when we pick this one up and lift it over, it'll just sit and rest nicely inside the gold one. I can pick it up and holding it again, top and bottom of the parcel, so not a bit it's going to be seen, with my cable needle can just gently put that into place and press down quite nice and hard. And then I'm just going to add a little green crystal in the middle, and again you can press down on that so it sits down in the clay and just gives a little bit of sparkle. And all I need to do now is do another one exactly the same for the other end, and then we've got a nicely decorated parcel again. The next parcel we're going to do is the little top one, and this is a technique I like to do particularly with something very ornate like the little snowflake cutter that I've got, because if you try and push these into the background clay or even inset them in, you tend to lose the definition. So if you've got a very ornate little cutter, then I say this is a good technique to do. So the first thing we're going to do is cover the two ends, and I've just got a round cutter that's bigger than the present. And as before, that has been given a very thin coating of the liquid clay. So I'm just putting that on top and just gently pulling it down the sides. And as always, I'm going to re-put the hole in so I know where that is. You can do the other side. Again, just very gently pulling it down. Give it a slight roll if you want to, just on the top edge. And then very gently just cut away the excess. And as you can see there, I was doing it very gently, going away from me, because it's very easy to cut into and carve into the ultralight and take out big chunks of that. So do it nice and gently. Then we're just going to sit our little parcel at the very top of the clay. Use the blade to get something roughly the right height, and then just wrap that round the outside. Where it overlaps, just take away. And now you can spend a bit of time running across the joins and the seams, both on the sides and around the top. I'm just roughly putting the blue one on top so I know where it's going to sit, so I don't need to do too much on the bottom, but I do need to decorate all the rest. And to add decoration to this one, I'm just using the snowflake cutter as I mentioned on the pack pen. I've got my gold and my white clay on the thinnest settings on the pasta machine, and I am just taking some cutouts. Sometimes they stay in the clay, sometimes they pull out, and I'll take probably about 10 of each colour, because I'm going to lay these. Obviously there's a little bit of dirt on the side, so I've just put it somewhere so you're not going to see, in a random fashion all over the top. And I'm not going to press these in any more than that. They're just going to sit on the top and be a decorative element on our little present. I'll do it first with one colour, so the gold ones, and then we're going to push those into the background by pushing some white ones over the top. And just add as many or as few as you think are necessary. And you can just leave them on there and either wrap ribbon around it or leave it as it is for another way of decorating one of your presents. And that is our top present, and again I'm going to put some holly on the very top of that, so I don't need any more decoration on it at this stage other than that. So we've got 4 presents done, so the last one to do is the round on the underneath. So I'm going to choose the inset star with a slight texture on it to be my pattern for my bottom round. So I've got that there, and this time we're going to do it slightly different order. So we're going to do the roll first around the outside and then add the ends next. That's another way you can do the decoration. So as before, making it just fractionally taller, not much but just a bit. I'm just going to have a neat end. Wrap it part way around, and as always, as soon as we've gone through an area where the hole has been covered on the other side, just poke through so that we have that option still available, so we can poke it through. Press down so you can see where to cut through. Fraction more off. As always, use the cable needle to roll over any gaps, find where the hole was and put that back through. And this time I'm going to just pull over the ends, just to push them down on the end piece. So roll over if you want to neaten it down. Bearing in mind we can always put the texture back on at any stage once we've got this to the right size and shape. Okay, so we've got our 2 holes, we can see where we are, and now I'm going to take a cutter that's slightly smaller than the end of our piece. Choose a nice part of the pattern. Where I've got a mixture of colours, and those rounds can just sit on the ends. And if we take another ribbon cane, and again this is one that I did from the other tutorial, and this is sort of like a teal type colour with white and then gold, and I'm going to do exactly the same as I normally do, take a thin stripe and work on the basis that the holes are either bottom or top. I'm going to start with go down the side, particularly as that's where I had the join, and all the way up just to where those rounds are, and then go around the other side. I'm just using my thumbnail just to actually break the clay off. Stretch it along the side, go across to the end, and then neatening off so you've got one end nice. You can just simply lay the ribbon round the edge where that extra piece joined on. Again, chop off with your fingernail where it joins, and repeat for the other end. And what I'll then do, in a nice contrasting colour, so possibly a bright red or something, I will do the same smaller bow as we did on these ones, so just the inner bit, so where the purple, so just the 4 lines, and do them in red, add them in red on either end, and perhaps put another little sparkle on the middle. So I've got my little red rosettes. I've just taken a small amount of gold, rolled it into a ball, popped that on the inside. So I can now pick that up, and as always, holding my piece where the holes are, that will pop on the end. I can use the point of the needle just to press it in to make sure it's nicely in place, and then we can drop in one of the crystals just to add a bit of sparkle. So there are 5 little parcels all wrapped up, all partially decorated. We've got a couple of final elements just to make them extra special, and the first one's going to be, let's create some little holly that we can add on when we start putting all the presents together. Having finished the presents, now it's time to add a little bit of decoration, and one thing we can add are some holly leaves and holly berries. So I've taken some colours of clay, so I've got emerald with 3/4 emerald and a little bit of black, all emerald, tropical green, and then some mint. And I'm going to do a skinner blend. I'm going to use my pasta machine for this, but if you don't have a pasta machine and you don't want to do a skinner blend, you could simply just add the colours one onto the other and roll them up from the dark to the light and get roughly the same effect. But for those of you used to polymer clay, we'll do a skinner blend, and again, as always, I have a tutorial with a few tips and techniques on how to get a good skinner blend, and I'll put a link to that in the details below this one. We've got 4 colours, but normal thing, diagonally through the end 2, straight down through the middle 2, and just put them together so you've got that nice diagonal line, and then we will end up with a blend going from one side through to the other. I've put both of the, because I'm only dealing with small amounts, there's about 3.5 grams of clay, about 1/8 of an ounce. So because it's only small amounts, I put it through on a thinnish setting, so setting number 5 of my pasta machine, and now I'm going to use setting number 3 when I put them through. Simply fold bottom to top, and where the fold is, I'm going to put fold first through the pasta machine and simply fold bottom to top as I go through till I end up with a nice blend from the mint all the way through to the dark green. When you've got your blend, just fold in half, and I'm going to put back through the pasta machine dark end first to give myself a longer, thinner strip, this time with the fold being at the side. And then I want as long and thin a strip as I can get, so I'm going to use the thinnest setting of my pasta machine, again dark end first, till I get a nice long strip. And just use whichever is your thinnest setting that doesn't tear or shred the clay on your particular pasta machine. And if you're doing this by hand, of course you could have just, as I said, added the 4 colours together and then just rolled them into as long and thin a strip as you can get. And then we're going to simply roll up from the dark end first, making sure there's no trapped air as you go. And then we have our nice simple cane to make our holly with. Now it's a bit too big still at the moment, so I'm just going to press it in to make it longer and smaller. And once I've got it going nicely and it's moving nicely, then I can start to give it a roll. Once I've got it to the size I want, all I'm going to do is just very gently, just with my thumb and finger, making that sort of motion, just pressing slightly down the sides. And I'm looking for a piece where when I take the slices, they're going to be less than ½ an inch across that way. So about 1.25 centimetres, or say just less than that. So I'm going to go in slightly more. So as you can see, even though these are small amounts of clay, this is going to give me a lot of slices for my holly. So if I cut down through, you can see there we've just got that nice variation of colour, and importantly the little bit of white around the edge, because I like the holly where, you know, when it goes out into the points, and the points quite often have a little bit of light on their edge. So that's sort of the look we're going to try and recreate. And just to show you on the measuring sheet, that was about the right size, so say just around ½ an inch or about 1¼ centimetres in diameter. I normally cut my holly in groups of 3, so I have 3 holly leaves going at each time with the berries in between. So I'll have a look at my stack of presents, see all the different places where I want to put the holly, and cut as many slices as I need. And cut the slices as thick or as thin as you need. Obviously, if they're very thin, you'll need to put them on places where they curl over the presents so they're not sticking proud. If you want them to stick proud, cut them slightly thicker. I tend to cut mine probably about between 1 and 2 millimetres in thickness as I go. So I've cut out all my holly leaves and just placed them on my measuring sheet, and I'm going to use one of the small round cutters. So if you've got one of these, fantastic. If you haven't, then a small straw will work. And if you're an artist and you buy paintbrushes, quite often the paintbrushes come with a little plastic round sheath over the brush end. They're a good size to use for this as well. Or you might find the end of a heart cutter works well. So anything that's got roughly that sort of size. And all we're going to do is we're going to take out little half circles to create our holly leaves. And one other tip for you, things like this get clogged really easily with the clay, so you could only do sort of like a few leaves and it would get completely clogged. So if you can, when you're working, I've just got ½ a cocktail stick here, so when I work I hold it just at the very top, so it hasn't gone very far down at all, just on the top, but it means that I don't have to keep taking the pieces out, going finding my cocktail stick, pushing it all the way through, and it makes it much quicker and easier to do. I also usually, because I'm very right-handed, meaning I'm not very good with my left hand, I will do the right-hand side of all of these pieces, then I'll physically turn the sheet round and do the left-hand side. So we are just going to, as I say, take out small little indents, and I try and leave it so you've got some of that lighter clay showing at the same time, right on the very points. I'll do 3 or 4, and then I'll need to push out. So you see there how the clay gets clogged? So because I've got that in place, all I have to do is just push it out. And then I can start again, and it's much quicker than having to fiddle around constantly getting a cocktail stick. So I'll get all this side done and bring you back when I got that, and then we'll swap round and do the other side. Having finished one side, just repeat the same on the other. And you end up with a lovely, sweet little looking holly leaf. And the last thing I do is when I've got them all done, with a nice pointed end of a cocktail stick, I'll simply do a single line down the middle. And then you have a fairly realistic looking holly leaf. When you put them together in bunches of 3 with a few berries, they look very much like holly. And there we have a lovely selection of little holly leaves ready to go on our stack of presents. Now, of course, if you've got a cutter exactly the right size, you could use a cutter. The little ones I've got, the little pack pens, are a little too small, and I've got another one, but that's too big. So I could sort of do with one that's just right. However, I do like the fact that when you do this, every single leaf is different, and I think that gives a nice touch to what we're doing. One last thing that's fun to do is to add a little label. So I've put some white clay through on setting number 4 of my pasta machine, and I've cut a piece that's 1/2 inch by just over 1/2 inch wide. So that's 1 1/4 centimetres by about just under 2 centimetres long. And I've got a little bit of gold clay, and I've taken a slice of one of the ribbon canes that I did, and this one was purple, white and blue. And I'm just going to chop that into 2 or 3 pieces. Take away any messy pieces. I put a bit of gold through on the thinnest setting of the pasta machine. And I'm just going to spread these out. You really only need a couple, but I'll do 3 just so it gives me a bit of placement choice. And then I'm just going to roll that so those lines go back into the background of the gold where they will spread slightly. So it's nice and thin. And then I've put one of the ornament cutters into the pack pen, and again you can do whatever size you want. You can just do a round cutter, that'll make a nice bauble, a little heart, whatever shape you want. But I'm just going to take that and cut a piece out. And that looks like a little patterned striped bauble. So that can sit on our little tag. I will take a slice of our holly cane and put it through the thinnest setting of the pasta machine. And then I can use my mini holly cutter, or again do exactly as we did but cut some really small holly leaves with a tiny little round cut around the outside. And these will just be a sort of a mishmash of colours. They can go on the gift tag above the bauble. And then I might just add a teeny tiny little bit of red just to do a dot. So there's like a little teeny tiny holly berry right in the middle. And then I'll use the point of a needle just to press that in place, and then the same point of the needle just to create a hole for our gift tag. And because he's quite a nice size, I might just trim him off a fraction on the bottom. So a line through those holly leaves, and then we have a lovely little gift tag that can also sit on top of our presents. To add an extra decoration on the bottom, I'm just going to create something that falls down away from the bottom parcel. So I've put some red clay on a thinnish to medium setting, so setting number 6 on my pasta machine, and I've gone 1.5 inches, about 4 centimetres across, and just cut 4 slices about that thickness. I'm then going to just take away and cut away a point from each of the 4, both sides, to make it look more like a piece of ribbon. Take a small round of some of the leftover red clay, and I'm just going to centre these pieces over it. Press down in the middle, and then we'll start to put a hole in, as always. And it's easier to start it again when it's on something flat like that. We'll then pick it up carefully, making sure you don't prick your finger if you're using a needle. Put a hole all the way through. And then we want to bend this down around something. And the easiest thing I found is the top of a pencil. So just put it on the top and very gently just press until all those pieces go down around the outside of the pencil. When they're only going flat, you can change the shape, sort of give them a slight kick up if you want to, or put whatever sort of pattern or swirls you want to put on. But basically, we're just looking for something that just hangs down, which will hang below the parcels and give us a little bit of extra interest. And very gently remove it. And all you need is a little bit of scrunched up, something like a piece of foil, so that when you bake this, and we'll bake this first before we add it to the present stack, and we'll bake the presents separately, it just sits on the foil and will bake. And here's one that I did in gold earlier. So I've just splayed it out a bit more on that one, and it just sits below the present, gives an extra little bit of additional detail. And of course, if you're not doing a hanging decoration, then you can always put this on top of your presents or add it in some way, or do whatever else you want to do with it. Just another little detail to add into your surprise presents. From this point on, I'm going to work on the tile I'm going to bake on. So I've put my bottom parcel on there. I've got myself a piece of the thicker wire that I know is bigger than the wire I'm eventually going to use, and I'm going to stack them up with the wire in between so that I know, and leave this in whilst it's baking, so that I know when I take this out afterwards that the hole will be completely straight, so I can put my thinner wire in. I'm also going to put a little bit of the poly paste in between each of the stack of parcels, just to make sure they're nicely secured. You don't have to do this, the clay will stick to itself, but I just like to add a little bit extra bit. Obviously liquid clay would work, and just a small dab of PVA glue would also work, but the poly paste is nice and thick and gives a nice finish. So I'm just going to dab a few bits down around the hole, and then put the wire down through the next present up, and then I can make sure I get it right into the hole where I want it to go, press down till I can feel the tile underneath, and then put the next present on top, place it just where I want it to go, and then just press down quite firmly in a place where I know is going to be hidden by the next present. And again, pressing gently down on this one because I don't want to distort too much, because I've only got a small area I'm going to do the decoration on. And there is our stack of presents. So I'm going to put the gift tag down here. Just fold him over the edge. And I've got a really small bit of wire. It's only 0.4 millimeters. I'm just bending it over. And then I'll cut off the excess and just put him in to make him look like there's a little bit of string on. You can see, just push that in with a pair of pliers so it looks like there's a little bit of string on our gift tag. And now I want some holly to go on all four corners of this present. So I'll show you one and then repeat with the others. So what I do is just curl the holly over, so that it's sitting nice and tight against the parcels. So I've got my 3 holly leaves in place, and then I will get a tiny bit of the bright red clay, roll it nice and thin, and take off small pieces. I do 3 per each group of holly. And with something like the needle, just pick them up, put them in place, and add a little hole, because that looks like the dark point of the berry. And there you have the holly on one side. So I'm going to do that on all 4 sides. I'm also going to add 1 piece, 2, 3, 4 with 3 berries round each piece on the top one. And then the last one thing I'm going to do is add some on the very bottom parcel, which we're doing slightly separately. So I'll get all those done and bring you back when I've got those done and show you what it looks like at that point. So there's the finished stack. So I've got my 4 lots of holly round the second present. I did my 4 holly leaves on the top one with the little berries, and I also decided to put an extra piece of holly by the decoration on the bottom parcel. So nicely decorated and all ready to go. And I've had a good look round to check that everything's as it should be. And then the last one to do is the bottom parcel, and all I've done is I've just added a couple of little sprigs of holly on either side so that you'll see that as the underneath piece, and then sit it so those pieces towards the top. Again, I've got another piece of the wire, and that will sit next to the presents there. And then, as we always do whenever we bake, I will tent the whole piece in aluminium foil, not touching, and of course because we've got the wires in, it's quite handy because the wire helps to keep it off the top. If you want to, if it's causing a problem, you could always just bend the top of the wire over so it's not sticking up through the aluminium foil. So tent the whole thing to protect the clay should your oven spike in temperature during the baking process, and bake according to the manufacturer's instructions for the brand of clay you are using. So when all those are done and our bottom piece, decorative piece, is done as well, then all we've got to do is literally add the wire, add a couple of beads, and the whole thing will be finished. Putting the whole thing together should be relatively straightforward. First thing I'm going to do is, just before I do anything else, just check that I can get that wire all the way up through. And it comes out the top. So a bit of persuasion, but it went through fine. So what I'm going to do now is put a little loop just on the end, just by rolling it round my round nose pliers, going back one way and then the other. So we've got a little loop on the end. I'm going to put one of those beads on, and then go up the inside of our little red piece we put on, because that sits nicely inside. And that's a bit right at the bottom of our decoration. It's going to go up through the bottom of the round parcel. So that's going to sit like that. And then we should be able to go, because I've just tested it, all the way up through the middle of our parcels. And then that's how the whole thing's going to sit and going to hang on the tree. So I've got a round bead to go on top, and as mentioned, I've got quite a large hole in this so that when I cut the wire off, I can put the excess length of wire down inside. So that's just going to sit nicely on the top. And of course, if you didn't have any beads or didn't want to use beads, you could simply make yourself a round of coloured polymer clay, put a nice big hole down it and make sure it was big enough to pop the wire back into. So I'm going to measure with my finger, just about a finger's width, chop the end off, and then bend right angles away from the bead, and then curl this piece back round. And what I'm looking for is to get a piece that's going to be long enough that I can pop the other end down inside the bead and have the whole thing. So I've got a nice loop on the top, but it's nicely held in place with a little loop on top. And then a piece of ribbon just to add in the top to hang it, and our little bundle of decorated presents is ready and finished. And here it is all finished with the ribbon on top. A surprising, perfectly parcelled stack of presents from Polymer Clay. Just as an alternative, here's another one I did. This one has got the blue on the top again with the white and gold snowflakes. The second parcel down, it's got finished off in the same way I did, and this was the oval with the red stripe, again slightly different colours. I've got the gingerbread men with purple next one down, and then the bottom one is the trees on the white background again. And for the bottom, I inlaid on a green background just circles, all the different colours, but actually did the cut out, putting them back in method that I showed you, and then just used tiny little strips of gold, laid it over the top and rolled the whole thing flat. And this one's got little gold tassely bits on the bottom with a red bead inside. So that's another option. Obviously you've just got your red bows on the side there. And one last set to show you. I keep mentioning if you didn't have to do it as a hanging decoration, you could simply do it as a table decoration, and here is one of those, using some of the sheets that I made as we were going through, and I was showing you the different examples of sheets you can make. And you can see what I mean about when you're doing it as a table decoration. It doesn't have to be symmetrical or sort of go through the middle. You can stack them any way you want. So I've got a large one on the bottom. I've just added a couple of little rosettes into the long bit. Obviously got our tag, blue rosettes going around the middle one, and then this top one I've just done an extra little bow using the same ribbon that I did here, and that's using the techniques I showed in the cute little tree videos that I did a couple of weeks ago. And I've got the holly coming out the top. So say, lovely little decoration just to have on your table or on a shelf or something, again just to give you a little bit of festive cheer. That's the end of today's workshop, and hopefully you'll have some fun and you too can surprise your friends and family with perfect polymer presents. You can have so much fun creating little stacks of parcels, whether as hanging decorations or just to have around the house. I really enjoyed this one. I hope you do too, and I look forward to seeing what you make. As always, thank you so much for watching, and a special thank you to those of you who subscribe. I really do appreciate it. Hopefully I'll see you next time, and we'll have some more Polymer Clay fun. That's it for now. Bye.